Thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to be speaking basically on urban design and what we need to do going forward to make a world for us, cities for us that are healthier. There are three issues that I see really we need to work with: density, mobility, and open spaces. These are the three things we need to focus on. Nothing really new about them. If you look at density, our cities are fairly dense. Mumbai, where I live, has an average density of 20,000 people per square kilometer. However, when people stay in slums, they actually stay in a density 10 times that. So the densest parts of Bombay have about 1 lakh people staying, which is the older, the British part of the city. That's got about 1 lakh. But a typical slum has 2 lakh people per square kilometer. So that is an issue we need to deal with going forward. Because as we all very well know, over 50% of the people living in Mumbai and working in Mumbai live in a slum. Until we don't tackle, that for 50% of the population, nothing is really going to matter. What's the policies the government has had is the SRA, the Slum Rehabilitation Authority, which has unfortunately just not been successful because they are relying only on one mechanism to solve the problem, which is a developer. A developer providing housing which is free. So if you do the math, you'd realize that if we continue using this system, we won't be able to solve the problem in the next 300 years, judging from the percentage of, since 95 when the SRA authority was made, there's just only 5,000 slums, and we need 1 million slums to be redeveloped. So it's just a long way to go. So unless we come up with better mechanisms to solve this problem, and it really cannot be solved by the market, because if you're talking about selling and giving free housing, Mumbai, the average sales is only 60,000 houses a year. So, and that will support. So these are not all slum houses. About 10,000 are slum out of that. So it's only that number. Then even if the 10,000 supports double the number or 3 times the number, 30,000 is what you'll be able to build, which is not really the number we need, nowhere close to the number we need to build. So there needs to be other mechanisms to deal with density. We all know the problems of living in a slum and the density. There is no ventilation, there is no light. And the sad part is that even SRA schemes, because open spaces are so small, they found that people living on the lower floors of the SRA schemes have a 10% higher chance of getting TB because there is no light and ventilation in their home. So the bottom 5-6 floors, you have a very high chance of getting TB because there's no light and ventilation in your home. So these new homes, which we are supposedly making and supposedly saying is the solution, is creating more health problems. So one is we need to deal with density, we need to deal with slums. Second, we all know we need to deal with mobility. Mumbai right now is paralyzed because our trains can't function. As an urban planner, what do we see as a solution for it? Obviously, cars are not the answer because the amount of space a car needs, you will have traffic jams. I mean, right now, 10% of the people travel by car, and if 10 goes to 12 or 15, what should take half an hour will take 3 hours for someone to reach. So that's not the answer either. The only answer seems to be if we can begin to reconfigure the city. So if you're looking at reducing density, the government has a scheme of um, connecting Virar with Alibag. It's a loop outside and creating 6 new towns along that hub. So that's a great idea. So if you have a new arc which sucks people out, and then each of them, you develop them. So supposing you're developing a new IT hub, supposing you're developing a new Hinjavadi, don't have only offices. Have it mixed use. So if you're creating an industrial park, if you're creating a pharma park, if you're creating anything, make it mixed use. So it should be walk to work, and walk to everything. Walking is relatively safe. You're distanced, I mean, as long as you're wearing a mask. So, and you require the least amount of space to walk. So if this notion of 15-minute cities or 15-minute neighborhoods where all your needs are met within a 15-meter walk is really ideal in so many levels. And that's something I think all of us need to embrace, because the most eco-friendly, most space-friendly, green solution you can have. Um, so newer towns and newer areas, we need to, even in the development plan, we need to have so that maybe, reconfigured neighborhoods to incentivize a balance of work, home, play, education, healthcare, markets. So these 5 need to have a balance. So most of your needs can be met in the neighborhood, and you don't necessarily, even if 50% of the people working and living are close by, that can work. By the way, there's a very interesting statistic that 50% of people in Mumbai actually walk to work. They don't. They don't take the train. They don't take a bus. Nothing. They walk to work. So, it's possible. If it's possible in Mumbai for 50% of the people, it's possible anywhere. So I think that's a mantra we need to use everywhere. This whole thing of land use and segregating land use is too passe. We should not be talking about it anymore. We should only be dealing with mixed use. And then we also need to deal with transects and transport led developments, where there are metro stations and where there are stations, increase the FSI and then taper it off as you go out. The third is really open spaces, wherein we're not only talking about parks, we're talking about parks and promenades. We're talking about, in Mumbai, we have 75 kilometers of coastline. And if you count all the, spaces you can use on the coast, say, starting from the south, starting from Marine Drive, when you go to Chopati Beach, go to Worli Sea Base, a little bit of stretch at Bandra Fort area, then you've got a little bit in Bandra, the promenade, then you've got Juhu Beach, and on the eastern side, you've actually got nothing. So out of the 75 kilometers, it's hardly 10 to 12 kilometers of the seafront, which we can actually use. And it's not very expensive to build a promenade or to have a promenade on stilts. Compared to the coastal road, where we're spending 12,500 crores for 2% of the population to use, spending 750 crores, we can really get promenades, all around, 75 kilometers of promenades. And that's where you get the fresh air. That's where you get the maximum openness, and lots can happen along there. The other focus I think we need to have is, how is our eastern waterfront going to be used? We have 1,800 acres of land on the eastern waterfront, which the previous government just gave away to the Mumbai Port Trust, said, you be the planning authority. Um, so to Mumbaikars, that really is unfair. That we feel the development control rules and the city should have a say on how this land is used. Okay, this land has served us extremely well for shipping. It's not needed for shipping anymore. Nava Seva is a much, much bigger um, port. Um, let's use this instead of Mumbai Port Trust, make it a Mumbai Revival Trust. Change that, the use of that trust to become a Mumbai Revival Trust. And 1,800 acres can be available for citizens to use on the eastern waterfront. Um, so we need to see how we can recycle our spaces, reuse our spaces, and also look at time. Um, there's been the Open Streets program in Bandra over the winter. On Sunday mornings, they close the road. Initiatives like that can happen in so many more places in the city, and why not? Um, there's this landslide that happened on Hanging Gardens and Pedder Road, Hughes Road below, and that road has been closed now for the last 2 months. Um, Earlier, it was unimaginable if the road were to close. What would happen to the traffic on Malabar Hill? How would people manage? But people seem to have managed extremely well. I mean, they're using Balkeshwar and Nepean Sea Road, and that stretch of land now between Hanging Gardens and Spenta Building has become an amazing promenade. I mean, all day you have people cycling, children cycling, people walking their dogs, people skating, all kinds of things. I mean, you've got parents with their little kids, showing them, training them how to cycle, etc. Um, it's become a wonderful open space. And during pandemics, we know you need to be out, you need your vitamin D, you need spaces. So why can't we do more of this during the week, wherein we say Sunday mornings, every neighborhood, one road closes and citizens can come out and use that space. We can, every neighborhood can happen all over, right from Kulaba to Andheri. You can close one major road, 5 kilometers length, and use that open space. So these were the few thoughts I had on how we need to replan and rethink going forward. Looking at density, definitely looking at slums, looking at mobility, being able to walk to work, mixed use, open spaces. Yep, I think I'm done. Can't hear you. You need to unmute.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Brilliant.
Yes.
Thank you for those refreshing thoughts. A couple of questions while we move to the next session. And before I ask you a couple of questions, guys, the session is open for questions. In case you want to send in your questions, you can type in the Q&A section and we will be taking up those questions. Okay, so why is that, public spaces or social spaces or looking at social design to solve issues is not something that is new. But yet every time we come across an issue, the trust is always put upon on designers that what can design intervention do? What could architects do? It can't be done alone by the architects or designer. It has to be a, work in conjunction with multiple partners. Where are we failing or what can be done better? What's your opinion on that?
Very good question, because we do fail quite a lot here. Our um, our acts, so our Town Planning Act is a highly outdated act. It's a 1967 act. It needs to be updated. When we speak about reform, these are the kind of reforms we actually need. So Maharashtra Town Planning Act needs to be reformed. Because we only function on 10-year master plans. Um, actually, having master plans is an outdated concept. It doesn't work. What instead we need, so we need to reform. So our legislators, our MLAs and our corporate MLAs more than anything else, need to change the laws which allows public participation and allows neighborhood development. So we need to have a law which says every neighborhood, every year has to come up with a scheme for improvement of or maybe a 5-year plan or a 2-year plan or a 3-year plan, whatever it is, has to come up with a plan on how to improve the neighborhood, and then certain amount of money allocated to it and a process within the neighborhood. So it could be handled by the ward, or it could be handled by something smaller than the ward, because even the ward is fairly large, but a budget allocated for citizens to take up initiatives which need to be done, and that needs to kind of percolate. So we don't have a mechanism to do that. And that reform is needed. That law has to come to allow citizens to participate. Otherwise, we go begging, Sarji, Kardo, go to the ward office, you go here, you go there. If the CM is nice, he says, Are Karado. So that's not the way a democracy should work. There should be a mechanism which we don't have. So we need reforms in these sectors. And the bureaucrats will only follow what the law says. They say, right, process to yahi hai. And process mein hai hi nahi, so how does it fit? It doesn't fit. So that's where the problem comes. It comes in policy.
And my another question was, you know, people have been, for the past 9 months, we have been hearing about the new normal setting in. This is the new normal. And then again, a week later, we'll again hear about now, this is the new normal. So, in fact, it's very abnormal to hear new normal anymore. And people say this is not the new normal. The new normal perhaps would be when we actually open our villages, all the lockdown is lifted, people move, the labor will be back to the city, the migration issue will be sorted. And that's when you will see a lot of change, because 9 months brings in a lot of cultural and behavioral change in human. It's a different kind of life that we have been living. So according to you, what or how can we prepare for the said new normal which will begin once everything is lifted, and what could be the changes that you expect from people in terms of designing structures or designing cities, even going inwards to tier 2 and tier 3 cities?
Well, yeah, so that's, basically, I feel we need to very, very seriously look at public health, and integrate. So again, as far as our Maharashtra Town Planning Act or any of the town planning acts go, there is no integrated thinking of hygiene, mobility, housing, and health. These things are not integrated in the Planning Act, and there are no parameters, and there are no goals which have really been set. So unless there are very serious goals set for these four aspects, nothing will happen. It can't be a political promise. It has to be set as a law that you have to achieve these parameters in this much time. Um, so so I think we need, as architects, designers, concerned citizens, we have not understood how democracy works. And unless we grapple with democracy and our policies and laws, I know I'm talking more like a lawyer than an architect, but that is where change will happen. Because even if you file a case in the High Court, the court will say, Baba, this, but the law to hai nahi, So even they can't do anything. You can't be helped. So unless our legislators move and reform, nothing will happen. You're mute, mute.
Again. So we have two questions. One from Kamal Pandit. He says, with work from home becoming a norm, will it lead to corporates to have smaller offices? And would there be enhanced space available for dwellings?
See, I think it's a temporary thing that is work from home is happening so much, but it will change. I think people will work more hours from home or that have the flexibility.
Mhm.
Um, that will happen. Uses of an office will also change. There will be more meeting places. There will be more a place to meet, to strategize, to work together on a project. And then it's like when you need to work together, you come there. And when you don't, you go back home. When you're to doing your own work, you work
Mhm.
from home. But when you need to do collaborative work, you come to the office. Um, Having said that, and if we know, see, even in the service sector, um, in India, owning a house or having a house or renting the house is really expensive. You know, so having additional space in your house, being able to afford additional space is very difficult. And in Mumbai, three generations live in one house. So it's very difficult for most of the population to work from home. Not an easy thing. So I think people do want to come back to work. It's the mobility issue that we need to sort out. I have an architect friend who's actually given 6 months notice to most of his staff and saying, I will only hire from 2 kilometers around me, people who live two
Yeah.
kilometers around me and who can walk to work. So he's actually doing that. He's saying, you know, this this is going to be my limit, 2 kilometers, and you can either cycle or walk, and you don't have to depend on public transportation. So maybe things like that will also happen. But yeah, I think there will be a more of a demand for it. But what's really going to happen is people are going to be able to live outside of a city more. People have realized when you don't go to the office, you can actually be anywhere. So you can be living in Alibag. So right now we have people working in our office living in Lucknow, living in Moradabad, living in Pune, living in Bangalore. Um, so you can be living in a farmhouse anywhere as long as you got internet. You can be living on a beach anywhere as long as you got the internet. So actually, sales of houses in Goa and Alibag and or hill stations, etc., going through the roof because that is what and also it'll be much more affordable to be able to live there. Getting Wi-Fi is not so expensive. So living outside and then commuting a few days a week, if you don't have to come every day, work. So I think the dynamic of a city is going to change in that sense, and the hinterland is going to develop much more in that sense. Um, with the Trans Harbour link coming up, I think many more people would prefer to live on the mainland and commute to Bombay once in a while. So mobility is changing and Wi-Fi is changing things.
Okay. And our final question is from Roshan Talera, who says, what are your views on HCP's plan for redevelopment of Mumbai Port Trust land? You have a comment there.
Yeah. See, my feeling there is that they have not followed the correct process. So as I mentioned before, the state government gave away its rights and said, Mumbai Port Trust, we give you all the rights to do whatever you want. So that in itself is ridiculous. Why should the city give away its rights? Right?
Yeah.
It should be part of the master plan of the city. So why did Fadnavis, what motivated him to give the rights to a corporation? We don't know. Then the second, so out of that decision arose that now it was only the priorities of the Mumbai Port Trust. Mumbai Port Trust said, Acha, we don't have to talk to anybody. We don't have to do anything. We can do whatever we feel like. So let's develop this commercially for its highest commercial value. And they told Bimal, this is your brief. This is what you should do. So Bimal has come up with a plan which, creates the highest commercial value for the land, which Mumbai doesn't need, Mumbaikars don't need, but Port Trust wants it. So you can't blame Bimal. Bichara, he's only an architect or a planner. Uski kya dosh hai? The dosh is of the government. So you need to go back and see, what is your client telling you? Who is your client? If the client was Mumbaikars, then we could demand things. But we are not the client anymore. We gave away our right. So we have to be careful who we vote for also. गलत वोट दोगे तो गलत ही होगा. Sorry.
No, that's being very candid and no issues. Thank you, Rahul. And it was really interesting to listen to you. I could go on and on, but I understand that we have a certain time limit to follow. But
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Lovely to be. Thank you. Lovely to be here.